He walked into a pharmaceutical room, bruised and bleeding. She had no idea he was the Alpha King. The storm howled like it was mourning something sacred. Rain didn't just fall, it attacked, lashing against the treetops, battering the earth like 1,000 angry fists. Branches snapped under the weight of the wind. Thunder cracked across the heavens, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long and mournful, as though it had seen what fate was about to unleash. Ilara ran. Her feet were torn and blistered, bare skin pressing into jagged frost and blood-slick roots. Every step sent lightning up her legs, pain pulsing with each breath she took. Her white coat, once pristine, was stained deep crimson at the waist. A wound hadn't closed, and the cold was making it worse. Her breaths came in ragged pulls, more steam than sound, and her hands trembled with something that had nothing to do with the chill. Power. Uncontrolled. Dangerous. Ancient. It surged beneath her skin like molten silver, desperate to be seen. But she couldn't let it out. Not now. Not here. Not when they were still hunting her. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She could feel them. The ones who had chased her through 6 towns, the ones who burned everything in their path. Their scent clung to the wind. Metal, smoke, silver, and something older. Something that reeked of cruelty and command. Ilara pushed through the underbrush, body breaking down with every heartbeat. The forest opened up without warning, giving way to an abandoned structure, a half-buried wing of what looked like a medical outpost, long forgotten by civilization. Ivy strangled its cracked concrete walls, and its rusted door hung slightly ajar, as if it too had grown tired of being whole. She didn't hesitate. Ilara slipped inside, slamming the door behind her with the last of her strength. The metal groaned in protest. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and the scent of old chemicals. Shelves lined the walls, filled with shattered vials, crumpled boxes, and ancient bandages yellowed with age. It was dark but not silent. Somewhere above her, the wind screamed through broken windows, and below her, her blood dripped onto the cold tile. She stumbled to a corner, collapsing behind a stack of discarded pharmaceutical crates. Her hands clutched her side, trying to stop the bleeding. But it was too late for that. The pain was too sharp, too deep. And then it happened again. Her fingers sparked. A pulse of light danced across her palm. Silver, fierce, alive. It crawled across her skin like it had a mind of its own. Her eyes widened with horror. No, not now, not here. She squeezed her fists shut, shoved her hands under her thighs, hiding them from the world, from herself. She wasn't supposed to have this power, not after what happened to her mother, not after they burned her for being something she couldn't even explain. The old stories said silver was a death sentence, not to shifters, not to humans, but to something in between. And Ilara, she was something in between. She leaned her head back against the wall, trying to breathe through the fear. The adrenaline was gone, and now the ache settled in like a slow poison. Her coat clung to her, soaked through. Her long curls were matted with rain and blood, sticking to her cheeks. Her lips trembled, not from cold, from everything. The fear, the grief, the knowing. They would kill her if they found her, just like they did her mother. Just like they tried to do last week in the alley behind the library, when they surrounded her with steel traps and tranquilizers like she was some kind of animal. But Ilara wasn't just prey. She was becoming something else entirely. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, a brief, broken moment, she let the tears fall. And that's when she felt it, a presence, not loud, not violent, but ancient, heavy, watching. It wasn't in the room, not yet. But it was near. A pulse of light danced across her palm, silver, fierce, alive. It crawled across her skin like it had a mind of its own. Her eyes widened with horror. No, not now, not here. She squeezed her fists shut, shoved her hands under her thighs, hiding them from the world, from herself. She wasn't supposed to have this power, not after what happened to her mother, not after they burned her for being something she couldn't even explain. The old stories said silver was a death sentence, not to shifters, not to humans, but to something in between. And Ilara, she was something in between. She leaned her head back against the wall, trying to breathe through the fear. The adrenaline was gone. and now the ache settled in like a slow poison. Her coat clung to her, soaked through. Her long curls were matted with rain and blood, sticking to her cheeks. Her lips trembled, not from cold, from everything. The fear, the grief, the knowing. And the wind spoke her name, not the one she had lived under for years, not the alias that kept her safe in shadows, but the one she'd buried like a corpse. Elara, child of flame, balance of blood. She heard it in the rustling of leaves, in the creak of the old tree, in the breath of the wind that touched her cheek like a lover returned from war. The prophecy had always said one would rise, marked by silver fire and hunted by wolves, but they had been wrong about one thing. She was not being hunted, she was being prepared. Rowan was watching her, not with curiosity, but with recognition, as if all the legends he had carried on his back had finally taken shape in front of him, and still he said nothing. His silence screamed, because he knew what came next. The shrine was not a sanctuary, it was a threshold, a place of awakening and judgment. Her skin was alight now, silver lines spiderwebbing across her arms, glowing beneath the torn fabric of her sleeves. Her pulse thundered in her ears, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was certainty. For the first time in years, she wasn't running from something. She was rising into something. But with there came the weight. The truth pressed down like winter snow, quiet, suffocating, inevitable. She wasn't just a myth. She wasn't just different. She was the key to war, to peace, to the survival or extinction of bloodlines older than kings. And Rowan, he wasn't just her savior, he was her balance. He knelt beside her, one knee sinking into the cold earth, and the shrine responded again. A new flare of light danced between them, two forces finally aligned. His blood still stained his jaw, still marked the edge of his collar, but his eyes were steady, amber fire reflecting her silver. The bond was forming, not just of magic, but of purpose. Still, the past clawed at her, the faces she had left behind. The children she couldn't save, the family who had feared what she might become, the promises she had broken simply to stay alive. Would she be enough? Would her fire consume her, or would she learn to wield it? A tremor passed through her limbs as the last rune on the shrine lit. The ground gave a low, mournful groan, as though mourning the moment before it vanished forever. And then, silence, utter and complete. Even the wind stopped. The shrine recognized her now. Not as a visitor, but as its chosen, the heir to fire, the one fated to break or bind the beasts that prowled the edge of legend. And for a breathless moment, she could hear their howls. Not far, not near, but coming. Drawn to her flame, she stood, shaking, shoulders trembling, breath uneven. Rowan reached for her, not to guide, but to steady. His touch was warm, grounding, real, and it made the world stop spinning for half a second. She looked at him, and in his eyes, she saw the echo of 1,000 fallen warriors, the cost of hope, the burden of belief. You're not ready, his gaze seemed to say, but you will be, because fate didn't wait for readiness. It demanded surrender, and she was done running. They left the shrine without another word. Behind them, the roots closed, the light dimmed, the air stilled, but something had changed, not just in her. In the forest, the trees no longer whispered warnings. Now, they listened. The balance had shifted. The war had moved from myth to reality, and with every step Elara took aside Rowan, the weight of that reality deepened. Because the prophecy wasn't just about saving the world. It was about choosing which part of it was worth saving, and which part had to burn. The ground trembled before the sound reached them. A low, thunderous growl rolled over the forest floor like a warning from the belly of the earth. Birds erupted from the trees, wings frantic against the blood-tinted sky, and the bitter scent of burning moss filled the air. Rowan's head snapped up, his body stiffened. Something ancient stirred. Elara barely had time to breathe before the clearing shattered. Shadow beasts burst from the underbrush, hulking, twisted forms stitched together with bone and smoke. Their eyes glowed the same cursed red as the moon above, their howls cracked and full of agony. Not of this world, but somehow born from it, corrupted, Rowan stepped in front of her instinctively. "Elara, stay behind me." His voice was low, controlled, but underneath it cracked like thin ice. She didn't ask questions. Her limbs trembled with something she didn't understand. Power, yes, but also fear, not of the beasts, but of what she was about to see. More figures followed. Not shadows. Wolves. Men. Familiar. A rush of movement, and suddenly Rowan's pack circled them, except these weren't allies. They didn't bow. They didn't greet him as Alpha. Their gazes were sharp with betrayal. Then the elder stepped forward, his fur streaked with silver, his eyes unkind. "She's the reason the moon has turned red," he roared, voice carrying, like a judgment carved into stone. "You brought death to our land, Rowan. That girl, she's cursed." Rowan didn't move. Ilara's breath caught. Not because of the elder's words, but because of Rowan's silence. The world slowed. She looked up at him, searching his face for something, anything. He didn't meet her eyes. He was frozen, torn. The beasts encircled them. The traitorous pack fanned out behind. And Rowan just stood there, his fists clenched, veins straining against his skin. She could see it, the war in his eyes. 1,000 oaths chained him to them. Blood, legacy, history. But her? She was just the girl he saved, the girl fate had thrown into his path, the girl whose power he didn't yet understand. Ilara took one slow step back. Her heart cracked inside her chest. Then she ran. Branches whipped across her face. Her lungs burned. The forest blurred into streaks of green and blood-red light. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away before she shattered completely. Behind her, she heard the clash. Claws, steel, roars of fury, but she didn't stop, because the sound that haunted her most wasn't the battle. It was the silence before it began. Rowan hadn't chosen her. He hesitated, and in that hesitation she'd seen the truth. "I knew it," she whispered, breath hitching through the cold. "No one will ever choose me." The trees blurred, her vision swam, tears mixed with the blood on her cheek. Their bond cracked before it could even bloom. Rowan's knuckles were split. His breath came in heaves, each one laced with smoke and guilt. The elder's blood dripped from his blade, but it felt like his own heart had spilled. He'd made a choice too late, and it cost him her. She ran, a voice behind him spat. "You protected the traitor." "She's not a traitor," Rowan growled, but his voice was hollow, because even now, even as he stood amidst bodies and broken loyalties, he could still feel it. That fleeting second where he had wavered, where he hadn't spoken her name, where he hadn't stepped forward fast enough. The guilt gnawed at him like frostbite. "She was chosen by the flame," he whispered. But the trees gave no answer. The moon above only glared. He turned away from the carnage. Every instinct screamed at him to follow her. But something deeper held him back. Shame, maybe, or fear. He had failed her. How could he face her now? Ilara's legs gave out near a ravine. She collapsed against the roots of a dead tree, chest heaving. Blood running down her arms from a dozen cuts she hadn't noticed. Her breath came in sobs. Not loud ones, just that soft, broken kind that came when you'd run too far from someone who was supposed to protect you. The wind howled through the ravine, carrying whispers only she could hear. They spoke in echoes, echoes of power, of destiny, of something older than time. But all Ilara felt was abandoned. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why give me power if no one will stand by me?" No answer came, just the wind. And then the cold set in. Not the weather. The kind that curled inward, like a part of her was turning to ice. She closed her eyes. Maybe it was better this way. Maybe being alone meant she couldn't be hurt anymore. But deep in her chest, something stirred. A flicker. A pulse. It wasn't anger. It was grief. Grief sharp enough to become fire. Back in the ruins of the clearing, Rowan stood at the edge of the circle where she'd disappeared. The trees were still scorched, the beasts gone, the pack scattered. He knelt and touched the earth where her blood had fallen. Warm. She had bled for him, and he had hesitated. The shame burned. He hadn't just failed her, he'd failed himself. The bond that had begun to form, raw and fragile, he'd snapped it with his silence. But it wasn't too late. unless she believed it was. He stood slowly, eyes hardening. "You're not just anyone, Elara," he whispered. "You're the flame this world fears." Then he shifted. Bones cracked, muscles snapped into place. His wolf rose in full form, pitch black and massive, eyes glowing amber against the night. He threw back his head and howled, not a call to the pack, a promise. Elara didn't sleep. She sat curled at the base of the ravine as the stars turned overhead. Her body trembled, her skin clammy, but she didn't move, until the ground shook again, soft this time, familiar. She looked up slowly. A shadow moved across the cliff above her. Then, a shape, large, loping, a wolf. Her breath caught. Rowan. He didn't shift back, not right away. He stood there, on the ridge, watching her, waiting. She didn't speak, didn't move. Her heart slammed in her chest. Then, slowly, painfully, he shifted, fur fading, bones reshaping, until he stood as a man again, chest bare, covered in cuts and bruises. But his eyes, they weren't the same. They were full of regret, and something else. He took a step down, then another. "Elara," she flinched. "I didn't choose them," he said softly. "I froze. I was afraid of what it meant to choose you, what it would cost me." She stared at him, lips trembling. "I don't want apologies." He shook his head. "You deserve more than that." Silence stretched. The wind stilled. Then Rowan dropped to his knees. "I chose wrong. I hesitated when I should have stood beside you. I won't make that mistake again." Her voice cracked. "How do I trust that?" He looked up, eyes shining with something raw. "Because I'll earn it. Every step, every breath, until you believe it." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, saw the broken edges in him too. He wasn't just the alpha. He was a man shaped by war, by duty, by pain. And maybe, just maybe, he was the only one who understood hers. The moon still bled red. The prophecy still hung over them. But in that moment, knees in the dirt, hearts bruised but beating, they found something more powerful in fate. Choice. And this time, it was hers. The night was quiet, but not silent. Crickets sang low in the underbrush, and somewhere in the distance, a river whispered over rocks, gentle and steady, like a secret being kept. Overhead, the moon hung swollen and pale, casting silver over every jagged surface of the cave mouth. He stood there, framed in the entrance like a shadow carved from old pain and fresh resolve. Rowan. His boots were wet. Mud clung to the edges of his cloak. In his calloused hands, he held a small bundle wrapped in cloth, herbs, roots, and strips of healing bark. Nothing magical. Just the sort of things a man collects when he's desperate to help and doesn't know how. Inside the cave, she didn't turn when he stepped in. Elara sat with her back to the wall, knees drawn up to her chest, her body outlined in moonlight. She wasn't hiding. No, not anymore. She was just bracing, like someone expecting a blow and pretending she's not. He cleared his throat, quiet. "You left before I could explain." Silence. He crouched. Placed the herbs gently on a flat rock between them, not too close, not too far. A truce offering. "You're bleeding again. You need these." Still, she didn't speak. Her shoulders rose, then fell, a slow exhale. Her voice when it came was soft but edged in glass. "You hesitated back there, when they blamed me." "I didn't." His words faltered, his hands curled into fists before he forced them open. "I didn't know what to believe, not for a second. Just what they said, it shook me." She turned to look at him then, and the moonlight caught in her eyes like frozen lightning. And that moment, that second, was enough to tell me everything. A silence cracked open between them, heavy, raw. Rowan sat down across from her, cross-legged, elbows on his knees. He didn't try to reach for her. He didn't plead. He just sat, like a man ready to bleed out quietly if it meant she'd stay. "I wasn't supposed to be alpha," he said after a long beat. "My older brother was groomed for it. Trained, crazed. I was the runt. The second son. Too soft, too curious." She watched him, said nothing. He continued, eyes focused on the herbs in front of him. "My mother once spared a trader's child, a baby. Said it wasn't right to punish the innocent for the sins of their parents. They called it weakness. Said it cursed the bloodline. They exiled her." He drew a shaky breath. "I watched her go, alone. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She kissed me once, whispered, "Mercy is not weakness, it's memory without vengeance." And then she walked into the wild, barefoot. Alara's voice was barely a whisper. "What happened to her?" "I don't know." His jaw clenched. "No one does. We were forbidden to speak her name after that." Silence again. And then, like something brittle inside her cracked, she shifted, slowly, and reached for the hem of her tunic. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, but with decision. She pulled the cloth up, just enough to show her side. 3 thick, gnarled scars ran diagonally across her ribs. Pale, shiny, brutal, old. She didn't look at him when she said, "They said I was marked by the prophecy, born under a red moon, touched by fire. My father tried to carve the curse out of me before it could spread." His throat tightened. "Alara." "I survived," she said simply, "but I never stopped running." She lowered the fabric. The silence in the cave pulsed with unspoken things. Then, slowly, Rowan moved. Not suddenly. Not like a man who expected to be allowed, but like someone making an offering. He shifted closer, his palm hovering between them, open, empty. "Let me touch them." She hesitated. Her breathing quickened, not from fear, but something more complex, more human. Then, after a long pause, she reached out and took his hand. She guided it to her side. His touch was warm, gentle, reverent, fingertips brushing the edges of the scars, like reading a language carved in flesh. His breath hitched. And when he finally looked up at her, really looked, his voice cracked around the words. "I see you, Alara. All of you. Not the curse, not the prophecy, you." Their eyes locked. The space between them folded in, like the pull of a tide. His other hand came up slowly, cupping the side of her face. Her lips parted, not from surprise, but because for a moment, just a heartbeat, she thought she might finally let herself fall. And then she pulled back, not sharply, not in rejection. Just a breath away, a trembling inhale between want and warning. He dropped his hand, didn't press. Instead, he nodded, a man who knew better than to chase what wasn't ready to be caught. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves like whispers of ghosts. Inside, something more dangerous bloomed. Not lust, not yet, but trust, fragile, new, flickering like the last light before dawn. He sat beside her in silence, shoulder barely brushing hers, like a promise made without words. She leaned her head back against the stone and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't feel hunted. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel alone. The cave held their breathing, like a lullaby made of scars and second chances. Neither of them said another word, because in that moment, moonlight above, blood below, they didn't need to. Their wounds spoke for them, and something ancient and alive listened. The night deepened. Later, when sleep took her, uneasy, twitching, half alert, Rowan stood and built a small fire at the entrance, not for warmth, but for watch. He didn't close his eyes. He sat with his back straight, muscles tight, gaze fixed outward, not from paranoia, from instinct. There was a scent in the wind, a shift in the air. He wasn't alone, and they weren't safe, but she was here, and that was enough. Because now, no matter what came, he knew what he was willing to bleed for. And she was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to believe, and that, more than prophecy, more than scars, was what made her dangerous. The fire crackled softly. In the distance, a howl rose, low, mournful, mourning. He didn't flinch. He simply whispered to the wind, a vow beneath his breath. "Trust me, or leave. But either way, I won't let them take you." And somewhere deep inside her sleeping mind, her pulse steadied, not because she was safe, but because she was no longer alone. Not anymore. The night swallowed Alara whole, a black maw of shadow and frost that clawed at her skin as she stumbled through the forest. Her scream still echoed in her ears, raw and jagged, like a wound torn open. The power that had erupted from her, wild, untamed, a storm of fire and wind, had left her trembling, her hands shaking as if they didn't belong to her. She could still feel the heat pulsing in her veins, a beast clawing to get out, and the weight of 100 accusing eyes burning into her back. The council's chamber, with its towering stone walls and flickering torchlight, felt like a lifetime ago, but the sting of Rowan's hesitation cut deeper than any blade. He was supposed to be different. He'd promised her that much, hadn't he? His voice, low and steady, whispering her name like it was sacred. But when the seer's words twisted the air, "She will burn us all," he'd flinched. His eyes, those warm amber pools she'd drowned in so many times, had flickered with doubt. And that doubt had shattered something in her she didn't even know could break. The forest was alive with whispers, not just the wind rustling through skeletal branches, but something older, something primal. Her bare feet sank into the cold, damp earth, each step a jolt of pain that grounded her, kept her from spiraling into the chaos of her own mind. She didn't know where she was running to, only that she couldn't stop. The accusation hung over her like a guillotine. Elara killed the Alpha King. The evidence, his bloodied crest, found in her satchel, a dagger with her scent, was a lie so perfectly crafted it felt like fate itself had turned against her. She'd seen the way the council's faces shifted from shock to fear to rage, their voices rising like a tide threatening to drown her. And Rowan, God, Rowan, he'd stood there, his broad shoulders tense, his jaw tight, but he hadn't spoken for her, not a word, not a single breath to defend her. The man who'd held her under the starlight just 2 nights ago, his calloused hands tracing the scars on her arms, whispering, "You're enough, Elara. You're more than enough." Where was that man now? Her breath hitched, a sob clawing its way up her throat, but she swallowed it down. She wouldn't cry. Not here, not now, not when the forest itself seemed to watch her, its ancient trees leaning in like silent judges. The air was thick with the scent of pine and wet moss, but beneath it, something sharper. Blood and smoke, faint but unmistakable. Her senses, heightened by the wolf stirring inside her, caught every sound. The snap of a twig, the distant howl of a pack she no longer belonged to. She wasn't one of them, not really. Not shifter, not human, not anything they could name. The prophecy had called her chosen, but the seer's words tonight had branded her something else entirely. The end. Elara's chest tightened, her heart hammering against her ribs like it wanted to break free. She'd never asked for this power, this curse that set her apart, that made her a target. She'd only wanted a place to belong, a hand to hold, a heart to trust. And she'd thought, foolishly, desperately, that Rowan might be that heart. She stumbled over a root, catching herself against a tree, the rough bark biting into her palms. Her breath came in sharp gasps, fogging in the frigid air. The moon hung low, a silver sickle slicing through the canopy, casting dappled light across her face. Her dark hair, tangled and wild, clung to her sweat-dampened skin, and her green eyes, too bright, too unnatural, the council had always whispered, darted through the shadows. She wasn't safe here. She wasn't safe anywhere. The pack would come for her, driven by fear, by the seer's venomous words. She will burn us all. Elara pressed her forehead against the tree, closing her eyes, willing her heart to slow. She could still see the council chamber in her mind, the high vaulted ceiling, the carved stone wolves glaring down from their perches, the air heavy with the scent of wax and fear. She could still hear the seer's voice, sharp as a blade, cutting through the murmurs. She is not the savior, she is the end. And Rowan, standing there, his silence louder than any shout, her fingers curled into fists, nails digging into her palms until she felt the sting of blood. She wanted to scream again, to let the fire inside her consume the whole damn forest. But she didn't, she couldn't. Not yet. She pushed off the tree, forcing her legs to move, her boots long lost in her frantic escape. The cold bit at her toes, but it was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. She'd trusted him, against every instinct, every scar, every lesson life had carved into her. She'd let herself believe in Rowan, the way he'd looked at her like she was more than a mystery, more than a prophecy. The way his laugh had rumbled through her, warm and real, when they'd stolen moments by the river, his fingers brushing hers as they skipped stones across the water. She'd let herself dream of a future where she wasn't alone, where she wasn't running. And now she was running again, because of him, because he'd flinched. The forest opened into a clearing, the moonlight pooling like liquid silver on the grass. Elara stopped, her chest heaving, her breath a white cloud in the air. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like the night itself was waiting to pounce. Her power stirred again, a restless heat coiling in her core.
begging to be unleashed. She could still feel the moment it had exploded in the council chamber, the way the flames had licked up her arms, unbidden, uncontrolled. As the accusations rained down, she hadn't meant to lose control. She never did. Ascended the throne of the Alpha King. But it had happened, and now they all saw her as a monster. Even Rowan. Her heart twisted at the thought, a sharp physical pain. She'd bared her soul to him, told him things she'd never told anyone. Her fears, her doubts, the way her power felt like a beast she couldn't tame. And he'd listened, his eyes soft, his hand ascended the throne of the Alpha King, his strong arms pulling her close, and for a moment, she'd thought he was different. She'd thought he saw her as his equal, his mate, the one who'd stand by her no matter what. But he hadn't. He'd stood there, silent, as the council condemned her. And now she was alone in the dark, running from the truth of who she was. Alara sank to her knees in the grass, her body shaking with exhaustion and fear. The clearing was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that made the hairs on her neck stand up. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud and frantic, and the distant rustle of leaves, like whispers of pursuit. She didn't know if they were coming for her yet, but she knew they would. The pack was relentless, bound by loyalty and fear, and she was the outcast, the one they'd never fully trusted. Her power, her curse, had always set her apart. But with Rowan, she'd felt seen. She'd felt safe. And now that safety was gone, ripped away by a lie she couldn't disprove. Her hands burned, the memory of the fire flashing through her mind, and she wondered if the seer was right. Was she the end? Was she destined to destroy everything she loved? She shook her head, forcing herself to stand. She wouldn't let them win, not without a fight. The air grew colder, the wind sharper, carrying the faint scent of smoke. She wrapped her arms around herself, her thin cloak no match for the biting chill. Her mind raced, replaying the council's faces, the seer's accusing finger, Rowan's frozen stance. She could still see the bloodied crest in her satchel, the dagger gleaming with her scent. Someone had planned this, someone who knew her better than anyone, someone who'd gotten close enough to plant the evidence. Her stomach churned. Could it have been Rowan? The thought was a knife to her heart, but she couldn't shake it. He'd known her satchel, known her habits. He'd been there when she'd left it unattended. But why? Why would he betray her? She'd seen love in his eyes, felt it in his touch. Or had she? Had she been so desperate for connection that she'd misread him entirely? She started moving again, her steps quicker now, driven by a surge of defiance. The forest seemed to close in around her, the trees taller, the shadows deeper. She could feel the wolf inside her stirring, its instincts urging her to shift, to run faster, to become something untouchable. But she fought it down. She wasn't ready to face that part of herself, not tonight. The wolf was too wild, too uncontrollable, and she couldn't afford to lose herself to it now. She needed her wits, her human mind, to figure out what to do next. The clearing gave way to denser woods, the moonlight fading as the canopy thickened. Her breath was a sharp rasp, her lungs burning, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The pack would track her soon, their noses keen, their loyalty to the council unwavering. She was their outcast, their scapegoat, and they'd hunt her until they found her. Her mind flashed back to the council chamber, the moment everything had fallen apart. The room had been a cavern of stone and firelight, the air thick with tension as the council gathered. Rowan had stood at her side, his presence a steady anchor, his hand brushing hers in a quiet promise. She'd felt proud, standing there as his guest, her chin high despite the whispers that followed her everywhere. The chosen one, they called her, but their voices were laced with doubt. She'd ignored it, focusing on Rowan's warmth, his strength. And then the evidence appeared, her satchel opened by the seer's trembling hands, revealing the crest and dagger. The rune had erupted, voices shouting, fists slamming against tables. She'd turned to Rowan, expecting his defense, his strength. But his face had been a mask, his eyes clouded with something she couldn't name. Doubt, fear, betrayal. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, and in that moment, her world had cracked. Ilara's foot caught on a stone, and she stumbled, her knees slamming into the ground. Pain shot through her, but she pushed herself up, ignoring the blood trickling down her leg. The forest was a maze, every tree a mirror of the last, every shadow a threat. She could hear the faint howl of a wolf in the distance, a
a sound that sent a shiver down her spine. The pack was close. She could feel their presence, a prickle on her skin, a tightening in her chest. She didn't know where to go, only that she had to keep moving. Her power surged again, a hot pulse in her veins, and she clenched her fists, forcing it down. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't the end. She was Alara, and she'd fight to prove it. The memory of Rowan's face haunted her, his amber eyes that had once burned for her now cold and distant. She'd thought he was her mate, her home. She'd let herself believe in forever, in a bond stronger than blood. But forever was a lie, and bonds could break. She could still feel his hands on her, the way they'd traced her scars with reverence, as if her brokenness was beautiful. She could still hear his voice, low and rough, promising her a future. And now, all she could hear was his silence, louder than any words. She stumbled into another clearing, the moonlight brighter here, the grass soft beneath her aching feet. She stopped, her breath ragged, her heart heavier than the world. She didn't know who to trust. Not anymore. The seer's words echoed in her mind. She is the end. And for the first time, Ilara wondered if it was true. Her power flared, a spark of fire in her hands, and she gasped, shaking it away. The flames had come unbidden, as they always did, a reminder of the beast inside her. She wasn't like them, not fully. Not shifter, not human, but something else, something they feared. She could still see the council's faces, their eyes wide with horror as her power had exploded, the flames licking the walls, the wind howling through the chamber. She hadn't meant to do it. She hadn't meant to lose control. But she had, and now she was running, the forest her only refuge, the night her only ally. She wrapped her cloak tighter, the fabric worn and thin, no match for the cold. Her body ached, her muscles screaming, but her heart hurt worse. Rowan's betrayal was a wound that wouldn't heal, a scar that would never fade. The forest grew darker, the trees denser, the air heavier with the scent of danger. Ilara's senses sharpened, her wolf stirring, its instincts screaming at her to shift. She fought it, her human will stronger, her mind clinging to control. She couldn't afford to lose herself now, not when the pack was coming, not when the truth was still out there, waiting to be found. She didn't know who'd framed her, but she'd find out. She'd clear her name, no matter the cost. The thought of Rowan's face, his hesitation, his silence, drove her forward, her steps fueled by anger and pain. She'd trusted him, loved him, believed in him, and he'd flinched. The memory was a fire in her chest, burning hotter than her power, fiercer than her wolf. She broke into another clearing, the moonlight sharp and cold, the grass wet with dew. Her breath was a white cloud, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. The forest was alive, every sound a threat, every shadow a hunter. She could feel the pack closing in, their howls growing louder, their loyalty to the council unbreakable. She was alone, but she wasn't helpless. Her power was a storm, wild and untamed, but it was hers. She'd learned to control it, to wield it, to prove them wrong. The seer's words were a lie, a trap, a blade aimed at her heart. She will burn us all. Ilara's fists clenched, her nails biting into her palms. She wasn't the end, she was the beginning. The night stretched on, endless and merciless, but Ilara kept running. Her heart pounded, her lungs burned, her soul ached. Rowan's betrayal was a weight she couldn't shake, a pain she couldn't outrun. But she would try. She'd run until her legs gave out, until her heart stopped breaking, until she found the truth. The forest was her battlefield now, the moonlight her guide. She'd fight, she'd survive, she'd prove them all wrong, because Ilara wasn't just the chosen one. She was the one who'd never give up. In that moment, she was not prophecy. She was power, chosen not by fate, but by fire. Her lips curled, not in a smile, but in something fierce, something that said she'd rather burn than bend. "This was never my home," she said, her voice steady, but laced with a tremor. Not fear, but rage, held tight, like a leash about to snap. "You don't own me. You never did." The Alpha laughed, a sound that made your skin crawl, like nails on a coffin lid. He stepped closer, his long coat dragging through the blood on the floor, unstained, untouched. "You were born for me," he said, crafted from fear, shaped by prophecy. "You are my sacrifice, Ilara, my weapon to break the world and remake it.
Her wings flared, sending a pulse of silver light that forced him back a step. The beasts whimpered, scattering like roaches. "I was never your weapon," she said, her voice rising, each word a spark that threatened to ignite the air. "I am the fire that frees." The alpha's smile didn't waver, but his eyes narrowed. A predator sensing a shift in the hunt. "You can't escape it," he said. "You're the flame of prophecy. You were made to burn for me, to feed me. Every fear you've ever felt, every doubt, it's mine. I am the hunger that never dies." Rowan moved then, stepping to Alara's side, his sword raised despite the blood dripping from a gash on his arm. His face was a map of defiance, but his eyes were soft when they flicked to her, like she was the only thing keeping him upright. "She's not yours," he growled, his voice low, dangerous. "She never was." The alpha's gaze slid to Rowan, dismissive, like he was swatting a fly. "You're nothing, boy, a flea on the back of fate. Step aside, or I'll feast on your fear too." Alara's hand shot out, grabbing Rowan's arm before he could lunge. Her touch was gentle, but her grip was iron, and the look she gave him was a conversation without words. "Stay, I need you, but this is mine." Rowan's jaw tightened, his knuckles white on his sword, but he stayed. Because love isn't just fighting for someone. Sometimes it's standing still when every muscle in your body screams to move. She turned back to the alpha, her flames brightening until the chamber felt like it was midday under a silver sun. "You fed on fear," she said, her voice steady now, a blade honed sharp. "Mine, theirs, everyone's. You built your power on it, but you forgot something." She stepped closer, her wings casting light that made the shadows scream. "Fire doesn't just destroy, it purifies." The alpha smile faltered, just for a heartbeat, and that was when you knew. Alara wasn't just powerful, she was inevitable. The air around her hummed, a low vibration that sank into your bones, like the world itself was singing her name. The beasts were gone now, dissolved into nothing, and the chamber felt smaller, tighter, like it was holding its breath for what came next. He struck first, not with claws or teeth, but with something worse, memories. They hit Alara like a wave, images flashing in her mind, vivid and cruel. Her mother's screams as the pack turned on her, the cold nights she'd spent alone, hiding from the world that wanted her blood, the whispers of prophecy that had haunted her since she was a child, telling her she was nothing but a tool, a sacrifice. Each memory was a knife, twisting deep, and her flames flickered, just for a moment, as her knees buckled. Rowan's voice broke through, raw and desperate. "Alara, don't listen to him." He was at her side now, his hand on her shoulder, his touch an anchor. "You're not what he says. You're more. You've always been more." Her eyes met his, and for a second, the world stopped. You could feel it, the way his belief in her was a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge. Her flames steadied, then roared, brighter than before, and she rose, her wings flaring wide. The memories didn't vanish, but they didn't own her anymore. She was rewriting them, turning pain into power. The alpha snarled, his form shifting, growing larger, his body twisting into something less human, more nightmare. His claws were long now, black as void, and his voice was a growl that shook the stones. "You can't deny me, Alara. You're mine." She didn't answer with words. She answered with fire. Her wings snapped wide, and a wave of silver flame surged forward, not wild, but precise, like a blade aimed at his heart. It didn't burn him, not yet. It wrapped around him, a cage of light, and for the first time, you saw fear in his eyes. Not the fear he fed on, but the kind that comes when a predator realizes it's become prey. The alpha thrashed against her flames, his form flickering between man and monster, his voice a howl of rage and desperation. "You'll die for this. You'll burn out and I'll rise again." Alara's face was calm, but her eyes were moons, bright and unyielding. "Maybe," she said, her voice soft, but carrying the weight of 1,000 truths. "But not today, and not for you." She tightened her flames, and the alpha screamed. A sound that wasn't just pain, but loss. The loss of control, of power, of the fear he'd wielded like a crown. The chamber shook, stones cracking, dust raining from the ceiling. But Alara stood steady, her wings a beacon in the chaos. Rowan was at her side.
His sword lowered now, his eyes never leaving her. He didn't need to fight anymore. This was her moment, and he knew it. And then, she stopped. Her flames didn't fade, but they loosened. Just enough to hold the alpha without destroying him. He collapsed, his form shrinking back to the gaunt man, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Why?" he rasped. "Why spare me?" Alara's wings folded, her glow softening, but not dimming. She looked at him, not with pity, but with something harder, understanding. "Because I'm not you," she said. "I don't need to destroy to be free. I choose my fire, not your hunger." The chamber was silent now, the air heavy with the weight of her words. The alpha stared at her, his face a mask of defeat, and for the first time, he looked small. Not a god, not a monster, just a man who'd lost his grip on the world he thought he owned. Rowan stepped closer, his hand finding hers, their fingers interlocking like they were made for it. His touch was warm, grounding, and when she looked at him, her eyes softened, just for a moment. "You did it," he said, his voice low, rough with emotion. "You saved us." She shook her head, a small smile breaking through the steel of her resolve. "We saved each other." The chamber was still now, the runes on the walls flickering back to life, their glow pale but steady. The bodies of the elders lay silent, a reminder of the cost, but the air felt cleaner, like the world had taken a breath and let it go. Alara's flames dimmed, her wings folding into her back, leaving her human again, but not the same. Never the same. She was fire now, not just in power, but in spirit, in the way she stood, in the way she chose. Rowan pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, his face buried in her hair. "I thought I lost you," he whispered. And there was a crack in his voice, a vulnerability that made your chest ache. "When you left, when you went to face the prophecy alone, I thought you were gone." She leaned into him, her hands resting against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I had to," she said softly. "Not for the prophecy, for me, for us." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes searching hers, like he was memorizing every fleck of silver, every spark of fire. "You're everything," he said, and it wasn't a grand declaration. It was quiet, raw. The kind of truth you only speak when you've seen the edge of the world and come back. The narrator's voice lingers, soft but steady, like a hand on your shoulder. That's what Alara and Rowan are, you know? Two people who looked at the world's darkness and said, "Not today." They're not perfect. They're not gods or heroes or anything the stories promised. They're just them. Flawed, fierce, and so damn human it hurts. And maybe that's the real power. Not the flames or the swords, but the choice to keep going, to keep loving, even when the world tells you it's impossible. The chamber's runes glowed brighter now, their light washing over the blood and the broken stone, like a promise that the world could heal. Alara and Rowan stood together, their hands still clasped, their breaths sinking in the quiet. The alpha was silent, bound by her flames, his power broken, not by force, but by her refusal to be his weapon. The shadow beasts were gone, their darkness burned away by her light. But it wasn't over. Not really. The world outside the chamber was still waiting, still full of fear and hunger and old wounds. Alara knew it. You could see it in the way her shoulders squared, the way her eyes flicked to the shattered doors. Rowan felt it too, his grip tightening on her hand, like he could anchor her to this moment just a little longer. "We're not done," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "There's more out there, more shadows, more fights." Rowan nodded, a small, fierce smile breaking through the exhaustion on his face. "Then we face them together." Her footsteps crunched against the frost-kissed leaves, each one a soft, deliberate rebellion against the silence swallowing the forest. Ilara's silhouette flickered through the mist, her dark hair trailing like smoke behind her, catching the last glimmers of moonlight before the clouds devoured it. The flames she'd left behind roared in the distance, their orange tongues licking at the skeletal remains of the village she'd burned. Not out of malice, no, never that, but out of necessity, a necessity no one else would understand, not yet, maybe not ever. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of charred wood, and something sharper, something primal. Blood, Rowan's blood. It clung to her senses, a coppery ghost that wouldn't let her forget the way he'd looked at her, sprawled in the dirt, his chest heaving, his eyes wide, with something that wasn't quite fear, but wasn't quite love either. "Ilara," he'd whispered, his voice cracked, raw, like the earth splitting open under too much strain. She turned back for just a moment, her heart clawing at her ribs, begging her to stay, to kneel beside him, to press her hands to the gash across his side and will it to close. But she didn't. She couldn't. The fire in her veins wouldn't let her. "Do you ever wonder," I say, my voice low, like I'm sitting across from you, the embers of a campfire crackling between us, what it feels like to carry a secret so heavy it burns you from the inside out? To know that the thing that makes you powerful also makes you a stranger in your own skin. Ilara knew that feeling too well. She'd always known it, ever since the first spark had flickered to life in her palms when she was barely old enough to understand what it meant to be different. Not just different, dangerous. Cursed, they'd called her, back when the village still had a name, before it became ash and memory. The forest swallowed her now, its shadows curling around her like a lover who didn't know whether to hold her close or strangle her. The mist was a living thing, coiling low, brushing against her ankles, whispering secrets she wasn't ready to hear. Every tree loomed taller than the last, their branches clawing at the sky, as if they too were reaching for something they could never quite grasp. Ilara's breath came in sharp bursts, each one a reminder that she was still here, still moving. Still alive despite the weight of what she'd done. Her hands trembled, not from the cold, though the night was bitter, but from the fire still simmering beneath her skin, begging to be let out again. She clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms, and forced it down. Not now, not here. Rowan's face flashed in her mind, unbidden, the way his dark eyes had locked onto hers, searching for something. Answers, maybe, or absolution. She hadn't given him either. She hadn't known how. His blood was still warm when she'd turned away, the crimson stain spreading across his torn shirt, pooling in the dirt like an accusation. She'd wanted to scream, to tell him she didn't mean for it to happen, that the fire wasn't her choice, it never was. But words were useless now. Words couldn't undo the flames. They couldn't bring back the homes, the lives, the trust she'd shattered. "Would you have stayed?" I ask, my voice softer now, like I'm leaning closer, like I'm pleading with you to understand. If you were her, would you have knelt in the dirt, pressed your hands to his wounds, and begged for forgiveness? Or would you have run too, knowing the truth would only make it worse? Ilara ran because she had to, because staying meant facing the questions she wasn't ready to answer. Not just Rowan's questions, but the ones clawing at her own heart. Was she a monster? Or was she something else entirely, something the world wasn't ready to name? The forest grew denser, the trees pressing closer, their gnarled roots snaking across the ground like traps waiting to snap shut. Her boots caught on one, and she stumbled, catching herself against a trunk, her palms scraping against the rough bark. The sting was sharp, grounding, a reminder that she was still flesh and bone, not just fire and fury. She pressed her forehead to the tree, her breath ragged, and for a moment she let herself feel it, the exhaustion, the fear, the ache of being so utterly alone. The wind howled through the branches, carrying the faint echo of Rowan's voice. Or maybe it was just her imagination, desperate to hold on to something human. She pushed off the tree and kept moving. The mist parted just enough to reveal a clearing ahead, a small circle of grass bathed in pale moonlight. It felt like a stage, like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what she'd do next. Ilara stopped at the edge, her chest tight, her pulse hammering in her ears. She could still feel the fire, restless, alive, curling through her veins like a beast pacing its cage. It wanted out. It always wanted out. But she wasn't ready to let it win. Not yet. "Do you know what it's like?" I say, my voice dropping to a whisper, like I'm sharing a secret I've never told anyone. "To love something that scares you? To feel it burning inside you, so bright and wild it could light up the world, or destroy it?" Ilara knew that love. She'd felt it every time she looked at Rowan, every time his calloused hand brushed hers, every time his quiet smile made her believe, just for a moment, that she could be more than the fire. But love wasn't enough, not when the fire was part of her, woven into her blood, her bones, her soul, not when it had already taken so much.
She sank to her knees in the clearing, the grass cold and damp beneath her. Her hands pressed into the earth, fingers digging into the soil, as if she could anchor herself there, keep herself from floating away on the tide of her own power. The air was still now, the wind gone quiet, and the silence was louder than the flames had ever been. It pressed against her, heavy, suffocating, demanding answers she didn't have. Why had she run? Why hadn't she stayed? Why couldn't she just be normal, human, safe? Rowan's face came again, unbidden, sharper this time. The way his dark hair fell across his forehead, matted with sweat and blood. The way his lips had parted, as if he wanted to say something more, but couldn't find the words. The way his hand had reached for her, trembling, before falling back to the ground. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block it out, but the image burned brighter, searing itself into her mind. She'd left him there, wounded, maybe dying, because she was too afraid to face what she'd done, too afraid to face him. Sometimes, I say, my voice cracking just enough to let you feel the weight of it. The hardest thing isn't the fight. It's the moment after, when you're left with nothing but the truth and the people you've hurt. Ilara's truth was a jagged thing, sharp enough to cut her open every time she tried to hold it. She wasn't just a girl. She wasn't just a shifter either, though the wolf inside her stirred now, restless, sensing her weakness. She was something else, something caught between worlds, between fire and flesh, between love and destruction. And she was so tired of carrying it alone. The clearing felt smaller now, the trees closing in, their shadows stretching long and thin across the grass. The moon hung low, heavy, its light casting Ilara's shadow in sharp relief, a lone figure, hunched, her shoulders trembling with the effort of holding herself together. The wolf inside her growled, low and deep, not angry but pleading, urging her to let go, to run, to be free. But freedom wasn't what she wanted, not really. What she wanted was Rowan's hand in hers, his voice telling her it would be okay, his eyes seeing her, not the fire, not the curse, just her. She stood, slowly, her legs unsteady, her breath catching in her throat. The forest was watching. She could feel it, the eyes of unseen creatures, the pulse of something ancient and alive in the earth itself. She took a step, then another, her boots sinking into the soft ground. The mist swirled around her, thicker now, wrapping her in its cold embrace. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't go back. Not to the village, not to Rowan, not to the life she'd burned to ashes. Do you believe in second chances? I ask, my voice warm but urgent, like I'm reaching out to you, begging you to answer. Do you think someone like Ilara, someone who's made mistakes, who's hurt the people she loves, can ever find her way back? Ilara wanted to believe it. She wanted it so badly it felt like a physical ache, a bruise pressed deep into her chest. But believing wasn't enough. Not when the fire was still there, waiting, always waiting, for the moment she let her guard down. The path ahead was narrow, barely visible through the mist, winding deeper into the forest. Her wolf stirred again, stronger this time, its presence a warm hum beneath her skin. It wasn't like the fire, wild and uncontrollable. The wolf was steady, sure, a part of her that didn't scare her the way the flames did. She let it guide her, let its instincts sharpen her senses. The world coming alive in ways it hadn't before. The rustle of leaves, the distant hoo of an owl, the faint scent of pine, and something else, something metallic, familiar. Blood. Her heart lurched. Rowan. Was he still out there, bleeding, calling her name? Or was it just her guilt, painting the forest with ghosts? She quickened her pace, her breath coming faster, the wolf urging her forward. The mist parted just enough to reveal a flash of movement ahead, a shadow, tall and lean, slipping between the trees. Her pulse spiked, her hands tingling with the threat of fire. She stopped, every muscle taut, her eyes scanning the darkness. "Who's there?" she called, her voice sharp, cutting through the silence. No answer, just the wind stirring the leaves and the faint, rhythmic thud of her own heart. She took a cautious step, then another, her hands raised, ready to summon the flames if she had to. The shadow moved again, closer this time, and she caught a glimpse of eyes, bright, amber, glowing in the dark. Not human, not Rowan. The wolf inside her snarled, hackles rising, But Alara held it back. She wasn't here to fight. She wasn't here to burn. "I don't want trouble," she said, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her gut. The shadow stepped into the moonlight, and her breath caught. A wolf, massive, its fur a deep silver that shimmered like liquid metal. Its eyes locked onto hers, intelligent, searching, and for a moment, she felt it, a connection, a pull, like it knew her in a way no one else ever had. "Have you ever felt it?" I ask, my voice soft but insistent, like I'm pulling you into the moment with me. That spark, that moment when you meet someone, or something, that sees you, really sees you for the first time. It's terrifying, isn't it? But it's also alive, electric, like the whole world shifts just a little. Alara felt that now, staring into the wolf's eyes, her fear melting into something else. Curiosity, maybe, or recognition. This wasn't just a wolf. This was something more. The wolf tilted its head, its gaze never leading hers, and then it turned, slipping back into the mist. Alara's heart pounded, her instincts screaming at her to follow, to chase that spark, to find out what it meant. She took a step, then stopped, her mind flashing back to Rowan, to the village, to the flames. What was she chasing? Answers? Redemption? Or just another way to run from herself? She closed her eyes, letting the wolf inside her take over, just for a moment. Its senses flooded her. The sharp tang of pine, the damp earth beneath her feet, the faint, fading scent of blood, Rowan's blood. Her eyes snapped open, her decision made. She couldn't go back, but she could go forward. She could find the wolf, find the truth, find something, anything that would make sense of the fire in her veins. The path wound deeper, the trees growing older, their trunks gnarled and twisted, like they'd seen too many winters, too many secrets. The mist clung to her skin, cold and heavy, but she didn't slow. Her wolf was awake now, fully, its strength flowing through her, steadying her steps. She felt it in the way her muscles moved, the way her senses sharpened, the way the forest seemed to open up to her, welcoming her in a way it never had before. And then she saw it, a flicker of silver in the distance, the wolf's fur catching the moonlight. She followed, her breath steady now, her fear giving way to something fiercer, something alive. The wolf led her to a stream, its waters dark and still, reflecting the sky like a mirror. It stopped at the edge, looking back at her, its eyes glowing brighter now, almost calling her. Alara knelt at the water's edge, her reflection staring back at her. Wild hair, sharp cheekbones, eyes that burned with something more than human. "Who are you?" she whispered, not to the wolf, but to herself, to the girl in the water who looked like her, but wasn't. The wolf didn't answer, but it didn't need to. It stepped closer, its breath warm against her cheek. And for the first time, Alara didn't feel alone. The fire in her veins quieted, just a little, like it recognized the wolf, like it knew this was where she was meant to be. "Do you think," I say, my voice low and warm, like I'm sitting beside you, sharing this moment, "that sometimes the things we're most afraid of are the things that save us? That maybe Alara's fire, her wolf, her curse, they're not just burdens. Maybe they're gifts waiting for her to claim them." Alara didn't know that yet. She didn't know she ever would. But as she knelt by the stream, the wolf at her side, she felt something shift inside her. A spark, not of fire, but of hope. The forest was quiet now, the mist settling, the moonlight softening. Alara stood, her hand brushing the wolf's fur, and for the first time, she didn't feel like running. Not from the fire, not from Rowan, not from herself. She didn't know what came next, but she knew she'd face it. With the wolf, with the fire, with whatever came. "And you," I say, my voice rising, urgent, pulling you in one last time. If this story lit something inside you, if it made your heart race, your breath catch, then don't let it go. Subscribe to Florence Werewolf Romance Collections, because here we tell tales that burn, tales of fire, of love, of girls who are more than their curses. Will you choose her side? And somewhere far from the ruins, another child of fire takes their first breath. The words hang in the air, heavy with promise, like the first crack of thunder before a storm. Somewhere out there, in the vast, untamed wilderness where the moon carves silver paths through jagged peaks, a spark ignites. Not just a flame, no, something fiercer, something alive. A pulse of power, raw and untethered, surges through the veins of a stranger who doesn't yet know their name, their purpose, or the weight of their destiny.
You can almost feel it, can't you? That shiver down your spine, like the world just tilted on its axis. Somewhere, a heart beats for the first time in sync with the ancient rhythm of the night. A child of fire, born to burn, born to change everything. But let's pull back, just for a moment, to the ruins we left behind. The air is thick with the scent of ash and sorrow, the kind that clings to your skin and burrows into your bones. The trees, once proud and towering, stand like skeletons, their blackened limbs clawing at a sky that offers no mercy. The wind moves through them, a low, mournful howl that carries the ghosts of what was lost here. You can still hear the echoes of the battle, the clash of claws, the guttural snarls, the desperate cries of those who fought to protect what mattered most. And in the center of it all, she stands, the heir of night, the one they whispered about in shadowed dens and sacred groves. Her name is a blade, sharp and unyielding, but her heart? Oh, her heart is a storm of its own, torn between duty and the ache of something softer, something human. She's not alone, not really. Even now, as she stands in the wreckage, her breath ragged, her hands stained with the blood of enemies and allies alike, she feels him. The one who's always been there, even when she pushed him away. His presence is a tether, a warmth that grounds her when the weight of her power threatens to unravel her. She doesn't want to need him, not after everything she's lost, not after the promises she made to herself to stand alone. But love, real love, doesn't care about promises. It's a beast of its own, wild and relentless, clawing its way through every wall you build. And he's there, in the shadows, watching her with eyes that see too much. Eyes that know her, every scar, every secret, every flicker of fear she's buried deep. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of pine and something sharper, iron, maybe, or the tang of magic still lingering in the air. She lifts her head, her dark hair spilling over her shoulders like a cascade of midnight, and her eyes, glowing faintly with that otherworldly light, scan the horizon. She's searching for something, or someone. The voice from the shadows lingers in her mind, a warning wrapped in velvet. She's not the only one. Her pulse quickens, a drumbeat of instinct that tells her the fight isn't over, not by a long shot. The heir of night has awakened, yes, but so has something else, something older, something hungrier. Let's shift our gaze now, far from the ruins, to a place where the earth hums with secrets. A small village, nestled in a valley, where the mountains stand like silent sentinels, their peaks dusted with snow, even in the heart of summer. The air here is crisp, sharp enough to bite. And the stars above burn brighter than they have any right to. In a small, weathered cabin at the edge of the village, a young woman stirs in her sleep. Her name is Lila, though she doesn't know the power it carries. Not yet. Her dreams are fevered, vivid, filled with images of flames that don't burn her, of eyes that glow like embers, of a voice that calls her name from the dark. She wakes with a gasp, her chest heaving, her skin slick with sweat. The room is quiet, save for the crackle of the dying fire in the hearth, but she feels it, a shift, a pull, like the world is waiting for her to take her first step into something bigger. Lila swings her legs over the edge of the bed, her bare feet brushing against the cold wooden floor. Her hands tremble as she pushes her hair back, the auburn strands catching the faint glow of the firelight. She's always felt different, like she didn't quite belong in this sleepy village with its predictable rhythms. The other girls her age dream of simple things, marriage, children, a life carved out in the shadow of the mountains. But Lila, her dreams are wilder, darker, filled with things she can't name. And tonight, something's changed. She can feel it in her bones, in the way her skin prickles, in the way her heart races like it's trying to outrun something. Or maybe it's trying to run toward something. She stands, moving to the window, her breath fogging the glass as she peers out into the night. The village is asleep, its lights dim, but the forest beyond calls to her. It always has. There's a pull there, a whisper in the wind that feels like it knows her name. She presses her palm against the glass, and for a moment, she swears she sees something, a flicker of movement, a shadow that's too tall, too human to be just a wolf. Her heart stumbles, a mix of fear and curiosity sparking in her chest. She's no stranger to the stories. The village elders speak of creatures that roam the woods, half human, half beast, their eyes glowing with the light of the moon. Werewolves, shifters, monsters they call them. But Lila's never believed in monsters, or at least she didn't. Not until now, when the air feels alive with a presence she can't explain, and her body hums with a strange electric energy. She steps back from the window, her breath shallow, her fingers curling into fists. The fire in the hearth pops, a sharp sound that makes her jump. She's alone, but she doesn't feel alone. It's as if the night itself is watching her, waiting for her to make a move. She wraps her arms around herself, trying to shake the feeling, but it clings to her like damp cloth. She's not like the others in the village. She's never been. Her mother used to say she was born under a blood moon, that it marked her for something special. Lila always thought it was just a story, a way to make a lonely girl feel less ordinary. But now, standing in the dim glow of her cabin, she wonders if her mother knew more than she let on. Back in the ruins, the air of night kneels among the ashes, her fingers brushing against a charred piece of bone. Her name is Celine, and she carries the weight of centuries on her shoulders. The battle that left this place in ruins was only the beginning, a brutal clash between her pack and those who seek to destroy them. She's the last of her bloodline, or so she thought. The Shadow's voice echoes in her mind. She's not the only one. Her jaw tightens, her eyes narrowing as she scans the darkened tree line. The words stir something deep inside her, a mix of hope and dread. Could there be another? Someone like her, born of night, carrying the same ancient power? The thought is both a lifeline and a threat. She's fought too hard, lost too much, to share this burden with someone unprepared. Celine rises, her movements fluid, despite the exhaustion pulling at her limbs. Her leather armor is torn, streaked with blood and soot, but she wears it like a second skin. She's a warrior, forged in pain and sacrifice, but beneath it all, she's still a woman who feels too much. The man in the shadows steps forward. His presence a quiet storm at her back. His name is Kale, and he's the one thing she can't outrun. His scent, pine, earth, and something uniquely his, wraps around her, grounding. Dude, I'm telling you, this guy is like her personal gravity. She wants to push him away, but he's always there, steady, unshakable, his dark eyes seeing straight through her walls. Celine, he says, his voice low, rough with worry. You don't have to do this alone. She turns, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and longing. Don't, she warns, but her voice cracks, betraying her. I can't afford to lean on you, not now. Kale steps closer, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. He's all muscle and heat, his presence filling the space between them. You're not alone, he says, his voice softer now, almost a plea. You never were. Her chest tightens, a flood of emotions threatening to break her. She wants to believe him, wants to let him in. But the last time she trusted someone, it cost her everything. Her pack, her family, her heart. She turns away, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the mountains loom like silent judges. There's another, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. The shadow said so, another heir. Kale's hand rests gently on her shoulder, and she tenses, but doesn't pull away. Then we find them, he says, together. Lila steps outside, the cold night air biting her skin. The village is silent, but the forest hums with life. Crickets, owls, the rustle of leaves. She pulls her shawl tighter, her bare feet crunching on the frost-kissed grass. She doesn't know why she's out here, only that something pulls her toward the trees, toward the unknown. Her breath catches as she steps into the forest, the darkness swallowing her whole. The moonlight barely reaches through the canopy, but her eyes adjust, sharper than they should be. She moves deeper, her heart pounding, her senses alive with something she can't name. A twig snaps and she freezes. Her head whips around, her eyes scanning the shadows. Nothing. Just the wind, she tells herself, but her body doesn't believe it. Her skin prickles, her pulse racing, as if her blood knows something her mind doesn't. And then she sees it, a pair of eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Not human, not animal, something else. She stumbles back, her breath hitching, but the eyes don't move closer. Instead, a low, rumbling growl fills the air, and her body responds in ways she doesn't understand. Her heart races, but not with fear. It's something else, something primal. Who's there? She calls, her voice steadier than she feels. No answer, but the air shifts, warmer now, as if the night itself is breathing. She takes a step forward, drawn to the unseen presence. I'm not afraid of you, she says, a lie that feels true in the moment. The growl softens, almost like a laugh, and then the eyes are gone,
swallowed by the dark. Lila's chest heaves, her mind spinning. She should go back to the cabin, lock the door, and forget this ever happened. But she doesn't. She moves deeper into the forest, her feet silent on the mossy ground. Her senses sharper than they've ever been. The air feels alive, charged with a power that hums against her skin. She's not alone out here. She knows it now, feels it in her bones, and for the first time in her life, she's not sure she wants to be. Back in the ruins, Celine and Cale move through the wreckage, their steps silent but purposeful. The air between them crackles with unspoken words, the kind that cut deeper than any blade. Celine's hand brushes against Cale's as they walk, and she pulls away, her heart a tangled mess of want and fear. "We need to find the other air," she says, her voice sharp to mask the vulnerability beneath. "If they're out there, they're in danger." Cale nods, his jaw tight. He knows her too well, knows the walls she's built around her heart. "We'll find them," he says, his voice steady, a promise carved in stone. "But you can't keep running from this." He gestures between them, his eyes burning with intensity. "From us." Celine's breath catches, but she keeps moving, her steps quickening. "There is no us, Cale," she says, but the words feel hollow, even to her. She can feel his gaze on her, heavy and unyielding, but she doesn't turn back, not yet. The ruins give way to a narrow path leading into the mountains, and Celine's heart pounds with the weight of what's coming. Another heir, another child of fire. The words burn in her mind, a spark of hope and fear intertwined. Far away, Lila moves through the forest, her shawl catching on low branches as she ventures deeper. The air grows warmer, the scent of pine and earth, mingling with something wilder, something that makes her blood sing. She stops. Her hand resting against a tree, its rough bark grounding her. The glowing eyes don't reappear, but she feels them, watching, waiting. Her skin hums with a strange energy, like her body is waking up for the first time. She closes her eyes, letting the forest's pulse wash over her. "Who are you?" she whispers, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and longing. The wind carries no answer, but the air shifts again, and she knows she's not alone. Somewhere out there, another child of fire is watching, waiting for their moment. And somewhere else, Celine and Cale climb the mountain path, their hearts heavy with the weight of destiny, drawn toward a truth that could shatter everything they know. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Two souls, born of fire and night, stand on the edge of their destinies, their hearts calling out to a world that's both beautiful and brutal. Celine, the heir of night, carries the weight of her pack's legacy, her heart torn between duty and the man who refuses to let her go. Lila, the child of fire, is only beginning to feel the power stirring within her, a power that could light up the world or burn it to ashes. Their paths are converging, drawn together by a force older than the mountains, stronger than the moon itself. And when they meet, nothing will ever be the same. The night is alive with secrets, and the dawn is far from certain. But one thing is clear, the fire has only just begun to burn.